February 28, 2026. Joint airstrikes by the United States and Israel hit Iran, kill Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and trigger a wave of missiles and drones in response that hits Israel, American bases, and Persian Gulf countries. In 31 days of conflict, thousands dead, millions displaced, and the Strait of Hormuz practically closed. 20% of the world's oil blocked. And while the world watches the greatest military escalation in the Middle East since 2003, a question echoes in millions of homes. Had the Bible already described exactly this more than 2,500 years ago? To understand what is happening this April 2026, you need to go back in time. Not just a few years, you need to go back 26 centuries. You need to open the book of Ezekiel in chapters 38 and 39 and read carefully what a priest exiled in Babylon recorded about a future war involving a nation called Persia. Persia, the ancient name of Iran. It is no coincidence. It is not an interpretive stretch. It is the name that appears literally in the original Hebrew text. Ezekiel 38 verse 5 lists the nations that would form a coalition against Israel in the last days. The first on the list is precisely Persia. Alongside it, Kush and Fut, regions that today correspond to parts of East Africa and Libya. And leading all this, a force coming from the remotest parts of the north identified as Gog, of the land of Magog. Think of the scenario. A prophet writing 600 years before Christ describes a specific military alliance marching against Israel. He does not speak of any generic nation. He names them, and the names he chooses correspond exactly to the nations that today star in the most serious conflict of the 21st century. This is, at the very least, disturbing. But before diving into the prophecies, look at what happened in the months leading up to this ground zero. In December 2025, Iran was already in flames from within. Massive protests took over the country. They were not common demonstrations. They were the largest since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. About 5 million Iranians took to the streets calling for the fall of the regime. The government's response was brutal. Between January 8th and 10th, 2026, Iranian security forces opened fire on civilians. Estimates of the dead vary between 7,000 and more than 30,000 people, depending on the source. 30,000. The number is so large that the human mind has difficulty processing it. It is as if the entire population of a medium-sized city were eliminated in a few days. The organization Harana documented names, ages, circumstances, children, teachers, mothers. The Iranian government recognized that thousands died, but blamed the United States and Israel for the unrest. And here arises the first question that should keep any attentive person awake. How does a regime that massacres its own people in January manage to become the center of an international war in February? The answer lies in the geopolitical machinery that had already been turning for years. In June 2025, Israel and the United States had already carried out the so-called 12-day war against Iran. During this conflict, Israeli and American airstrikes severely damaged the nuclear facilities of Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo. The Iranians responded with more than 550 ballistic missiles and more than 1,000 suicide drones. The result was devastating on both sides. About 1,190 dead in Iran, 28 civilians dead in Israel, and more than 3,000 wounded. A ceasefire mediated by the United States ended the conflict on June 24, 2025, but the peace lasted only 8 months. Consider the situation from a biblical point of view for a moment. Ezekiel describes a land that would dwell in security before being attacked. The Hebrew text uses the expression Yashab Betash, to dwell with confidence. Israel, despite all its wars, remains a nation that considers itself secure, protected by one of the most advanced missile defense systems on the planet, the Iron Dome, and backed by the world's greatest military power. This confidence, according to many scholars, is exactly the type of security that Ezekiel describes before the Great Attack. On February 24, 2026, President Donald Trump gave his State of the Union address and declared that Iran had restarted its nuclear program and was developing missiles capable of reaching the United States. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that Iran had stockpiled highly enriched uranium in an underground facility that had not been damaged in the previous round of attacks. However, the same IAEA stated that there was no evidence of an organized nuclear weapons program. 4 days later, on February 28th, the attacks began. If you are following the events and feeling that there is something bigger behind all this, know that millions of people around the world are feeling the same thing. The history of Iran and Israel did not begin yesterday. It spans millennia. And the Bible does not just record this history. It anticipates chapters that seem to be opening before our eyes. Many people know the biblical accounts superficially, heard them in Sunday sermons, but few have really dived into the depth of what is written. The last words of Jesus on the cross, for example, were not just expressions of pain. Each of them carries a prophetic weight that connects directly with the events the world is experiencing today. The digital book, The 7 Last Words of Jesus That Shook Jerusalem, reveals exactly this hidden meaning, the thread that connects the cross to the chaos we see now in the Middle East. If you want to access this material right now, it's simple. Take your cell phone, open the camera app and point it at the square code appearing on the screen. A secure link will appear automatically. Just tap it and you will have immediate access to the digital book. If you prefer, the link is also in the description of this video. On your cell phone, tap the video title or the More option to open the description. On a computer or television, look just below the video where the link appears. Thousands of people are already deepening their faith through this reading, and by accessing it, you also help keep this channel active, producing biblical content like this. Access now and comment Amen below, returning to the facts. Operation Epic Fury, that was the official name given by the Americans, began in the early hours of February 28th, with surprise attacks in several Iranian cities. The main target was the Leadership House complex, where Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was located. The attack was precise. Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran since 1989, was killed. He was the man who had commanded the country for 37 years. 37 years. An entire generation of Iranians knew no other leader. Silence and then chaos. Khamenei's death triggered a chain reaction. An interim leadership council was formed on March 1st. On March 8th, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the deceased leader, was elected as the new supreme leader. Power was transferred within the family itself, like a dynasty. But inside, the regime was cracked. The New York Times described the leadership as paralyzed, with decision-making processes compromised. The destruction of communications infrastructure generated paranoia and internal disputes. Tehran, a metropolis of more than 9 million inhabitants, turned into a ghost town. Civilians were afraid to leave their homes. The Iranian response was fierce. Waves of missiles and drones were launched against Israel, American bases in Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain and Qatar, and against energy facilities in the Persian Gulf states. Saudi Arabia intercepted 10 drones in a single day. The Emirates activated defenses against multiple threats. The company Emirates Global Aluminium in Abu Dhabi suffered significant damage. Scale this. The conflict went beyond the borders of Israel and Iran. Countries without direct involvement began to have their infrastructures attacked. The Philippines declared a state of emergency due to energy shortages. The country had only 45 days of oil reserves. A conflict in the Middle East, strangling a nation in Southeast Asia, and the Strait of Hormuz closed, practically blocked for almost 4 weeks. 20% of the planet's oil and natural gas passed through there. Ships stopped transiting. The price of a barrel skyrocketed. The International Energy Agency released 400 million barrels from reserves to contain the crisis. It is as if all the gas pumps on a continent depended on a single road, and someone had placed a wall in the middle of it. Now observe what happens when you overlay Ezekiel's description onto the current map. The prophet describes an attack that comes like a storm, like a cloud covering the land. He describes a coalition that surrounds Israel on all sides. He mentions fire and brimstone descending from heaven. He mentions earthquake and convulsion among the nations. And he mentions that God himself intervenes to destroy Israel's attackers, not because of the merit of the Jewish people, but so that all nations may know his name. There is a crucial difference here. The prophecy of Ezekiel 38 is not a manual of geopolitical predictions. Serious scholars, both those who believe the text refers to the present time and those who see a future fulfillment, agree. The scriptures were not written for humans to play at predicting wars. They were written to reveal the character of God. Theologian Kim Riddlebarger warns that linking Ezekiel 38 to contemporary events has serious interpretive weaknesses. On the other hand, Greg Laurie argues that the alignment of nations fits the prophetic descriptions like never before. The question is not who is right. It is what this text reveals about who is in control. The book of Daniel adds another layer. Chapter 11 describes a conflict between the king of the south and the king of the north that is part of a chain of events culminating in the second coming of Christ. Historically, this prophecy described with frightening precision the wars between the Ptolemies of Egypt and the Seleucids of Syria in the 3rd and 2nd centuries before Christ. But the text also points to a future repetition of this pattern, a southern power provoking a northern power, which then invades and conquers much of the Middle East. And when you look at the current board, with Iran to the east, Israel in the center, the United States projecting military power from bases scattered throughout the region, and Europe watching nervously as energy prices skyrocket, the parallel is impossible to ignore. 13 American soldiers confirmed dead. More than 200 wounded. 1,900 civilians dead in Iran, according to the Red Crescent, with nearly 25,000 wounded. In Lebanon, 1,189 dead from Israeli attacks, including 124 children, 20 Israelis dead, and more than 6,000 wounded. 100 dead in Iraq. And the count continues. Each number is a person. Each person is a story. And at this point, the human dimension of the prophecy becomes inescapable. Ezekiel did not just describe movements of armies and nations, he described the cost. They shall fall by the sword, says the text. Birds of prey and wild animals will be satiated. The language is brutal because war is brutal. And when you see images of entire neighborhoods of Tehran reduced to rubble, families fleeing southern Lebanon in crowded pickup trucks, children sheltered in makeshift tents on the coast of Beirut under rain, the prophecy ceases to be ancient text and becomes an open wound. If what you are feeling now is a weight in your chest, an uneasiness that cannot be explained just by the news, perhaps it is because there is something deeper speaking to you. The Bible is not just a book of predictions, it is an invitation, and the most intense moment of this invitation is in the last hours of Jesus before the cross, when every word he uttered carried the weight of all humanity. To understand this in depth, access the digital book, The 7 Last Words of Jesus That Shook Jerusalem. The QR code is on the screen now. Point your cell phone camera and tap the link, or access through the link in the video description. By doing so, you also contribute to this channel, continuing to bring this content to those who need to hear it. Access now. There is another element that deserves attention in this scenario: the role of Russia. In Ezekiel 38, the coalition against Israel is led by Gog, of the land of Magog, identified as the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. Many scholars identify Magog as the region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, which corresponds to southern Russia. The text says that this leader will come from the remotest parts of the north. If you take a map and draw a straight line north of Jerusalem, it crosses Turkey and reaches directly into Russia. The geometry is precise, and the conflict was not restricted to 2 countries. Iraqi militias crossed the Iranian border, nearly 5,000 fighters, to support the war effort. Children as young as 12 were reported as possible participants in military support. An 11-year-old child was killed at a checkpoint in Tehran. Yemen entered the conflict. Hezbollah opened a new front in Lebanon. 830,000 Lebanese were displaced, 1/6 of the country's entire population. Imagine if 1 in 6 Brazilians had to abandon their home in 1 month. Then a question arises that few are asking. If the Bible really described this scenario, why were so few people prepared? The answer perhaps lies in human nature. Jesus said in Matthew 24, verse 6, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed." He did not say this so that people would ignore the signs. He said it so that they would not enter into blind panic, but rather into spiritual attention. The difference is enormous. Panic paralyzes, attention directs, and the direction Jesus points to is not toward bunkers or food stockpiles. It is toward a posture of the heart. The prophet Daniel received visions about the end times while he was exiled in Babylon. He was not a military strategist. He was a man of prayer. When he understood that the exile would last 70 years, his response was to kneel and pray. God's answer came through the angel Gabriel, who revealed to him the prophecy of the 70 weeks, one of the most debated prophetic texts in history, pointing to the coming of the Messiah and the events preceding the end. Daniel 9, verse 27, speaks of a covenant confirmed for 1 week, a period of 7 years, and of an abomination that arises in the middle of that period. Many theologians associate this covenant with a peace agreement in the Middle East that will be broken. And when you look at the recent history, the collapse of the JCPOA in 2018, the failed negotiations of 2025, the pattern of broken agreements repeats with a consistency that sends chills. On March 1st, 2026, Israeli and American airstrikes hit at least 26 of the 31 Iranian provinces. 120 historical sites were damaged, universities were bombed, hospitals affected, 25 damaged, 9 completely out of operation. A girls' primary school in the city of Minab was hit. The school was next to a military complex, the kind of proximity that turns children into statistics. And in the midst of all this, something else is happening in Iran that rarely appears in the news. The Iranian underground church is growing. Christian ministries in the region report that the number of Christians in Iran has increased rapidly in recent years, even under severe persecution. David Yegnazar, executive director of Elam Ministry, described the Iranian church as having been tested by persecution, conflict, and economic crisis. While bombs fall on Tehran, there are people kneeling in secret rooms to pray to the God whom Ezekiel described as sovereign over all nations. There is irony in this, or there is providence. It depends on how much you are willing to see. The war brought consequences that spread like waves. Lufthansa suspended flights to destinations in the Middle East. Qatar called for an immediate end to the conflict after missiles hit energy facilities in the Gulf. The price of oil reached levels not seen in decades. Trump offered a pause in energy attacks until April 6th. Iran declared hotels with American forces as legitimate targets. Iranian politicians pushed for withdrawal from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Each day, the escalation became harder to reverse. Revelation 16, verse 12, speaks about the great river Euphrates being dried up, so that the way of the kings of the East might be prepared. The Euphrates rises in Turkey, passes through Syria and Iraq. It is the same region where American bases are being attacked by Iranian missiles at this very moment. The Book of Revelation describes this event as part of a sequence culminating in the Battle of Armageddon, the final confrontation between the forces of good and evil, located in the valley of Megiddo in northern Israel. Armageddon, a word that moved from the pages of the Bible to military briefings. And here is the most disturbing data. The Military Religious Freedom Foundation of the United States received more than 200 complaints from soldiers reporting that commanders used Christian end times rhetoric to justify the war. Troops were told that President Trump had been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran and provoke Armageddon. This is not biblical interpretation. This is the instrumentalization of faith. The sacred text was written to reveal the will of God, not to rubber stamp the decisions of generals. Everything that is happening now touches a deep chord in the human soul. It doesn't matter if you are a theologian, a political analyst, or just someone trying to understand the news. The feeling that we are living in a decisive moment is shared by millions. And this feeling did not arise from nowhere. It echoes words written millennia ago. If you feel you need to go beyond the surface and understand what the cross of Christ means in this context of global chaos, the digital book, The 7 Last Words of Jesus That Shook Jerusalem, was prepared exactly for this moment. Point your cell phone camera at the QR code on the screen and tap the link that appears, or access through the link in the description. Your reading also sustains the continuity of this channel. Isaiah 2 describes a time when Jerusalem will be the spiritual center of the planet, when nations will beat their swords into plowshares. Micah 4 repeats this promise almost word for word. The message is clear. After chaos comes restoration. After war comes peace. But not just any peace, a peace that no diplomatic negotiation would be capable of producing. And this is the point where biblical prophecy separates from any human prediction. Analysts try to predict based on data and trends. The Bible predicts based on a plan that transcends any government or alliance. Empires pass. The word remains. Today's Iran is the same soil where Cyrus the Great ruled 2,500 years ago. The same Cyrus whom the prophet Isaiah called by name, 150 years before he was born, as God's instrument to free the Jewish people from Babylonian exile. Isaiah 45 verse 1. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, a pagan king called anointed by a Hebrew prophet. Divine irony does not respect political borders. And now in that same land, missiles cross the sky and children hide in underground parking lots because there are no shelters in Tehran. On the 30th day of conflict, Iran reported nearly 2,000 dead through the Ministry of Health, but the NGO Rana already counted more than 3,400, including more than 230 children. Israel recorded 20 dead and more than 6,000 wounded. In Lebanon, families fled along the coast under rain, children sheltered in tents by the roadside. Modern warfare has a characteristic that Ezekiel could not have predicted in detail, but which he captured in essence. It respects no limits. The prophet described the attack as a cloud covering the land. Well, clouds of smoke over Tehran, clouds of debris over Tel Aviv, clouds of uncertainty over global oil markets. The metaphor materialized. So the final question that needs to be asked is not whether Ezekiel was right or wrong. It is not whether we are living in the last days or just another violent chapter of human history. The question is different, and it is personal. In the face of all this, where are you? Not geographically, spiritually. Because if there is a God who announced the name of Cyrus before he was born, who described the coalition of Persia before it existed, who promised restoration after destruction, then the invitation this God makes is not for you to watch the events from the sofa with popcorn and Bible in hand. The invitation is for you to decide, now, while it is still now. When the prophet Ezekiel recorded the vision of a coalition coming from the north marching against Israel, he had no way of imagining ballistic missiles, suicide drones, or disputes over enriched uranium. But the structure he described, an alliance of specific nations, a conflict centered in the Holy Land, and an outcome in which God intervenes directly, resonates with a precision that bothers both skeptics and theologians. It is not about turning the Bible into an almanac of geopolitical predictions. It is about recognizing that, in the midst of the chaos the world is experiencing this April 2026, there is a silent invitation to look beyond the headlines. Empires rose and disappeared. Cyrus's Persia became the Iran of the Ayatollahs. Rome became a tourist ruin. Alexander's armies are dust. But the text remains, and the question it carries crosses the centuries without losing its force. If all this was already written, what else is left to happen? Every generation that lived through a great war tried to find its reflection in the prophetic pages. Some were wrong. Others were looking at the right place, but at the wrong time. What no one can deny is that, when bombs fall on Tehran and missiles cross the sky of Tel Aviv, the book of Ezekiel ceases to be ancient literature to become the most urgent reading on the planet. And perhaps that is the point that matters most. It is not about getting dates right or putting together prophetic puzzles. It is about what you do with what you know. Because if there really is a larger plan behind what seems like only destruction, then every day is an opportunity for decision. And spiritual decisions do not wait for the morning news. This narrative you followed today is not just information. It is a mirror. It shows the world as it is, and shows at the same time that nothing that happens is beyond the reach of him who wrote history before it happened. The last words of Jesus on the cross were pronounced in a moment of absolute pain, but each of them contained a promise that extends to this day, to this exact moment when you read or hear these words. The digital book, The 7 Last Words of Jesus That Shook Jerusalem, is your gateway to this deeper understanding. Take your cell phone now, open the camera, and point it at the QR code on the screen. The secure link will appear automatically. Just tap. If you are on your cell phone watching the video, tap the title or more to open the description and find the link. On a computer or television, it is just below the video. By accessing it, you not only deepen your faith, you help keep this channel alive to continue producing content that illuminates what most prefer to ignore. Access now and leave your amen in the comments. Because if there is a moment to decide, that moment is this.